Has anyone ever wondered why the Ellen DeGeneres show set has the exact same layout as Epstein's island temple? The same geometry, the same design, one figure at the center, every face turned inward, everyone giving. What was her real role for the elites who flew to that island and never talked about what happened there? I know the answer, because I was inside that building. I sat in those hallways. I drank from her cup, and I barely made it out. What I'm about to tell you is not a theory, not a conspiracy. It is what I witnessed inside the walls of a studio that was never built for entertainment. Something lives behind that smile, something ancient, something hungry, hiding in plain sight behind a laughing, dancing, grinning face, and it has been feeding on us every single day. I want to be clear about something before I tell you any of this. I was not a conspiracy theorist. I was not someone who looked for darkness in things. I was 26 years old. I had spent 3 years freelancing in Los Angeles, doing pre-production work for reality television. And when the call came that I had landed a staff position at the Ellen DeGeneres show, I cried. Actual tears. Standing in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, I cried. I was going to be a segment researcher. My job was to pre-interview guests before they went on camera, find their story, find the moment, hand it to the producers so the show could use it. It was real work, meaningful work, the kind of work I had moved to Los Angeles to do. I called my mother first, then my best friend. Then I sat on my kitchen floor and thought about how hard the last 3 years had been and told myself it was finally over. The struggling was finally over. I had no idea it was just beginning. My first morning at the studio, I noticed the smell before anything else. Fresh flowers, coffee, and underneath both of those, something else. Something faintly sweet and slightly medicinal that I could not identify and could not locate. It was just there, woven into the air of the building like it had always been there, like the building itself was producing it. The lights were always on. That was the second thing I noticed. Every hallway, every corridor, every room, warm, golden, constant light. Even in areas where no filming happened, even at 6 in the morning before anyone arrived. The building was always lit, always warm, always waiting, and the audience seats. Rows and rows of them, all angled perfectly toward the stage, toward the center, toward her. I walked past them every morning on my way to the production offices, and every morning I had the same feeling I could never quite name, like the seats were not empty, like something was already sitting in them. I filed that feeling away. I had a job to do. The staff were friendly. Immediately, almost aggressively friendly. Everyone smiled when you walked into a room. Everyone laughed at everything. Nobody complained, not about the hours, not about the pressure, not about anything. I had worked in television long enough to know that every set has complainers. Every production has people who vent in the parking lot, who roll their eyes behind the director's back, who count the days until the season wraps. Not here. Here, everyone performed, all the time. Even when the cameras were off, even when she wasn't in the building. The performance never stopped. I told myself it was just a positive workplace culture. I had never worked somewhere truly positive before. Maybe this was what it looked like. I watched the audience members arrive every taping. They came in excited, genuinely, openly excited. They had waited months for these tickets. They dressed up. They arrived early. They gave everything they had the moment they walked through those doors. And they left looking drained, not tired, not overstimulated, drained. There is a specific look a person gets when something has been taken from them. A flatness behind the eyes, a slight slackness in the face, a quality of emptiness that has nothing to do with being sleepy. I saw that look on hundreds of faces walking out of those tapings. Every taping, without exception. I filed that away too. 3 weeks into the job, a woman pulled me aside. She had been with the show for years. One of the senior crew, someone who knew every corner of that building. She said it casually, the way you mention something obvious. like she was telling me where the good coffee was. Don't eat or drink anything from her office, just don't. I laughed. I asked why. She shook her head and walked away. That evening, I mentioned it to another crew member as a joke. They didn't laugh. They looked at me for a moment and said, "Just don't get too comfortable in there. That's all I'll say." Then they changed the subject and never brought it up again. 2 weeks later, the woman who warned me was gone. No goodbye, no explanation. Someone said she quit. Nobody asked why. Nobody talked about it. She was simply there, and then she wasn't, and the building continued exactly as before. I told myself every workplace has turnover. I told myself that's all it was. 3 weeks after she disappeared, I was sitting in Ellen's office, and there was a cup of tea on the desk in front of me, still warm, like it had been poured just before I arrived. Had been in her office twice before that day. The first time was my 3rd week on the job. I was dropping off a revised guest schedule, something a producer asked me to deliver because they were stuck in a call. Ellen wasn't there. The office was empty. I set the papers on the desk and turned to leave, and that's when I saw it. A teapot on the corner of the desk, 2 cups beside it, both already poured, steam still rising from both of them. Nobody in the room, nobody expected. Just 2 cups of tea, poured and waiting, in an empty office. I stood there for a moment longer than I should have. Then I left. I told myself she had probably just stepped out. I told myself it was nothing. The second time was 2 weeks later. Another errand, another delivery. This time she was there. She looked up when I walked in and smiled and said, "Sit down. Sit down," like she had been expecting me. We talked for maybe 20 minutes. She asked about my background, my work, what I thought made a good story. She was warm, disarming, exactly like the television version of herself, except somehow more so, more present, more focused, more interested in every word I said than anyone had been in a long time. I left that office feeling lighter than I had felt in months, better than I had felt since moving to Los Angeles. I walked back to the production offices thinking that maybe I had been wrong about the strangeness of this place. Maybe it really was just a good job. Maybe she really was just a good person. I didn't question the feeling. I should have questioned the feeling. The 3rd visit was a Tuesday in January. A schedule change needed to be delivered in person, something about a guest segment being moved, something that required a signature, mundane, forgettable, the kind of errand that takes 4 minutes. The office was warmer than the rest of the building. It was always warmer than the rest of the building, but that day it was noticeable in a way it hadn't been before. The soft colors, the plants, the ambient light, all of it pressing in slightly, slightly too close, slightly too calm, and the smell, that same herbal, sweet, medicinal smell from my first morning in the building, but stronger now, concentrated, like it was coming from the walls themselves. The teapot was on the desk, 2 cups, steam rising, like she was expecting someone. She gestured to the chair before I could say anything. "Sit, sit." Same words, same warmth, same smile. I sat down. I told myself 4 minutes. I told myself I just needed the signature and I would leave. She started talking, easy, natural, the way water moves. No effort, no resistance, just flow. She mentioned something I had worked on that week, something specific, something that told me she had been paying attention in a way I hadn't realized. She made me feel seen. She made me feel like the most important person in the room. I didn't notice how much time was passing. The cup slid across the desk mid-sentence, no pause, no offer, no moment where she said, "Would you like some tea?" She was talking and then the cup was in front of me the way a glass of water appears at a restaurant. Expected, natural, already decided. My hand reached for it before my mind had any input on the matter. There was no moment where I chose to drink it. It just happened. The taste was warm, floral. Something underneath that had no name, something that sat at the back of the throat and spread slowly downward. Ellen watched me set the cup down, still talking, still smiling, eyes completely still, And then the warning came back. Don't eat or drink anything from her office. I looked at the cup. I looked at her. Did you put something in this? She didn't flinch, didn't pause. Smooth and immediate, like the question was one she had answered before. It's just herbal medicine. I add it to everything. Some people have a reaction. Are you feeling all right? Let me get you some water. She stood, moved to the door, called for someone down the hallway, and I was alone in the office. I looked at the cup. I looked at the teapot. I looked at the 2 cups that had been poured before I arrived, before anyone knew I was coming. Then the first wave hit, warmth spreading from the chest outward, the edges of my vision softening, not darkening, just softening, like the world had been turned slightly out of focus. The hum of the studio lights above me shifting in pitch, becoming rhythmic, almost musical, and underneath all of it, a hollow pulling sensation from somewhere deep in my chest, like something reaching inward, like something taking inventory. I stood up. I needed air. I needed outside. I turned left out of the office, the direction of the exit, always left. I had walked this hallway every single day for months. The hallway didn't look right. I knew where I was. I knew this building, but the building didn't seem to know me anymore. I knew this building. I want to be clear about that before I tell you what happened next, because I need you to understand that what I experienced was not confusion. It was not panic. It was not the kind of disorientation that comes from stress or exhaustion or a long day under studio lights. I knew this building the way you know your own hands. I had walked those hallways every single day for 8 months. I knew which fluorescent light flickered near the east corridor. I knew which door stuck in the morning before the air conditioning kicked in. I knew the exact number of steps between the production office and the nearest exit. 41 steps. I had counted them. I turned left out of her office. The direction of the exit, always left, always 41 steps. The hallway didn't look right. It wasn't dark. That's the part that still gets me when I think about it late at night. It wasn't dark or shadowy or cinematic in the way that fear is supposed to look. The lights were on. The lights were always on in that building, warm, amber, humming softly. And they were on now. But the hallway was longer than it should have been. Not dramatically, not impossibly, just longer. Like someone had quietly inserted 10 extra feet of corridor while I wasn't paying attention. Like the building had exhaled and expanded and settled into a shape that was almost right, but not quite. I kept walking. I passed the mural, the painted sun on the north wall, the one I walked past every single morning. Bright yellow, cheerful. I had always passed it on my left. It was on my right. I stopped, turned around, looked at it. The same mural, the same painted sun, the same cheerful yellow. On the wrong side of the hallway. I told myself I had turned around without realizing it. I told myself the tea was doing something to my sense of direction. I turned back around and kept moving, faster now, and I found the clock on the wall near the production corridor. Checked the time, 3:47. I kept moving, found another corridor, found another clock, 3:47. The second hand was moving. I watched it move. I counted 15 full seconds, 3:47. The warm-up music started. That cheerful, bouncy, audience-ready music they play before every taping. The kind designed to make hundreds of strangers feel like they're at a party. Started playing from somewhere in the building. There was no taping scheduled that afternoon. I knew that because I had checked the schedule that morning. The studio was empty. The building was supposed to be nearly empty. The music played anyway, getting louder, getting closer, coming from no direction I could identify, just everywhere, filling the corridors, bouncing off the walls, relentlessly cheerful in a building that felt completely, utterly wrong. I passed the audience seating area, visible through a long panel of windows running along the corridor wall. All the seats were empty. Every single one. Rows and rows of empty chairs, all facing forward, all facing the stage, all facing the place where she stood every afternoon, waiting. I had the feeling, sudden and absolute and completely irrational, that the seats were not supposed to be empty, that something was missing from them, that something was supposed to be sitting there. I turned a corner and she was at the end of the hallway, not running, not moving, just standing there, perfectly still, in the way that a person stands when they have nowhere else to be and all the time in the world to wait, smiling. I turned around, went the other direction, moved fast, not running, because some part of my brain was still insisting that this was explainable, that I was going to feel very embarrassed about this in about 20 minutes when I was outside in the parking lot breathing fresh air. I turned another corner. She was there, different hallway, impossible timing, same posture, same smile, same eyes, flat and still and completely, utterly empty of anything that moves the way human eyes are supposed to move. You haven't finished your tea. The voice came from behind me, low, gentle, tender, the way you'd remind a child about something they'd forgotten. Not a threat, not a warning, a reminder. Soft and warm and completely wrong in a way I cannot fully explain even now. That tenderness was the most frightening thing I have ever heard in my life. A scream I could have processed, a threat I could have run from. But that voice, that warm, patient, almost loving voice, told me something that no threat ever could. She wasn't angry that I was leaving. She was simply certain that I wasn't going to. I ran. I don't know for how long. My phone said one thing. My body said something completely different. Every corridor looped back. Every exit sign led somewhere wrong. Another hallway, another corridor, another stretch of warm amber light humming softly overhead. And at the end of every hallway, her, standing, smiling, waiting. The voice again, closer now, from somewhere just behind my left shoulder. Come back inside, the show's about to start. And then I saw it. At the end of a hallway I had not been down before. Real light, daylight, coming from under a door that looked different from every other door in that building. Older, heavier, slightly ajar. I moved toward it. The hallway stretched. I kept moving anyway. The voice directly behind me now. Same tone, same tenderness, same patience. Come back inside. The show's about to start. I hit the door with both hands and pushed through it and fell into the afternoon light of the parking lot, and the door swung shut behind me and it stopped. All of it, instantly. Not gradually, not slowly fading like waking from a dream. Instantly. The pulling in my chest, gone. The hollow behind my eyes, gone. The music, gone. The hum, gone. I stood in that parking lot and I breathed, and within 60 seconds I felt completely, entirely, perfectly like myself again. And that, more than anything that had happened inside that building, that was what terrified me. Not what she had done, but how completely it stopped the moment I stepped outside, like a switch had been flipped, like I had simply stepped out of range. I stood in that parking lot for a long time, not because I couldn't move, because I needed to think, because something was assembling itself inside my mind, slowly, quietly, the way a picture comes into focus when you finally step back far enough to see the whole thing. I looked back at the building, beige walls, a sign with her name on it, ordinary, completely, aggressively ordinary. It looked like a place where a television show was made. And then the memories started arriving, not new ones, old ones, things I had seen every single day and filed away and never once connected. The audience members, every taping, leaving through those double doors looking drained, not tired, not bored, drained, like something had been quietly removed from them while they were busy laughing and screaming and giving everything they had to a woman on a stage, the staff who never complained, never questioned, smiled on cue, laughed on cue, performed contentment so consistently that I had mistaken it for the real thing. The producers who flinched, the veteran crew member who warned me, and then disappeared, and then nobody asked where she went. The teapot, 2 cups, already poured. Before I arrived, she wasn't expecting a guest. She was expecting a participant. The maze, the corridors, her standing at the end of every hallway, not chasing me. I understand that now. Not chasing me at all, hurting me. There was a difference. And then the larger picture, the one that had always been there, hiding behind the dancing and the giveaways and the carefully engineered joy of a television show that ran for 20 years and never once felt like enough. The Epstein files, the island, the flights, the silence of everyone who knew and said nothing. You don't build a network that large for money. Money is easy. You build something that large because what you're collecting cannot be bought or transferred or stored in any account. They needed a face, something warm, something disarming, something that could stand at the center of a room full of open, willing, unguarded people and receive everything they were giving, and never once looked like that's what it was doing. They needed a smile. She was always the hinge. I looked up at the second floor window, her office. She was standing there, still, watching me, smiling, the same smile from the hallway, from the stage, from 20 years of television, beamed into living rooms across the world. I didn't go back inside. I didn't call anyone. I didn't file a complaint. I didn't try to explain what had happened to me in those corridors to anyone who hadn't been there. I just left, and I never went back. I don't know what name to give what I felt in that building, but I know what that place was. It wasn't a television studio. It was a temple. And every person who ever sat in those seats, every person who ever laughed on cue, cried on cue, screamed on cue, they were never the audience. They were the offering. I got out. Most people never even knew they were inside.